Rebecca had been staring at the dashboard clock for the past 10 minutes, watching the numbers change while her stomach twisted into knots. It was 3 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, and she was sitting in her old Honda Civic in the parking lot of a Taco Bell in downtown Los Angeles. Her 6-year-old son Tommy sat in the back seat, trying hard not to complain about being hungry. Next to him, her 4-year-old daughter Lily had finally stopped asking when they could eat and had gone quiet, which somehow felt even worse. The past 2 weeks had been a nightmare that Rebecca kept hoping she'd wake up from. She'd worked at the same retail store for 5 years, slowly climbing from sales associate to assistant manager. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady. It covered rent, groceries, and the occasional treat for the kids. Then the corporate office decided to restructure, which was just a fancy way of saying they were letting people go. Rebecca got the news on a Monday morning, and by Monday afternoon she was packing up her desk. She'd tried to stay positive at first. She had a little money saved up, enough for maybe 2 months of bills if she was careful. She'd find something else quickly, she told herself. People were always hiring, right? But 2 weeks of job applications and rejections had eaten away at her confidence and her savings faster than she'd expected. The rent was due in 5 days, and she had exactly $47 in her checking account. That morning, she'd made the kids breakfast using the last of the eggs and bread. There wasn't much left in the apartment after that. Some crackers, a can of soup, maybe enough for one more meal if she stretched it. She'd spent the morning filling out applications online while the kids watched cartoons, trying to keep them distracted from the fact that lunchtime had come and gone with no lunch. Around 2 o'clock, Tommy had finally said it. "Mom, I'm really hungry." His voice was small, like he was afraid to ask. That's what broke her. Her 6-year-old shouldn't have to feel guilty about being hungry. Rebecca had gone through the apartment looking for any money she might have forgotten about. She checked coat pockets, the junk drawer under the couch cushions, even the old purse she hadn't used in months. She'd found $3.60 in quarters, dimes, and nickels. Then she'd gone out to the car and dug through the cup holders and the center console, another $4 in change, mostly quarters from the parking meters and drive-thrus of better days, $7.60. That's what she had to feed her children. She'd driven to the Taco Bell because it was cheap and the kids liked it. Tommy always got excited about the crunchy tacos and Lily loved the cinnamon twists. Rebecca had looked at the menu board from the parking lot, doing the math in her head. 2 kids' meals would be just under $8 with tax. She didn't have enough. She'd have to get them something cheaper, split it between them somehow. That's when she'd started crying, sitting there in the driver's seat while her kids waited patiently in the back. She'd tried to keep it quiet, but Tommy had noticed anyway. "Don't be sad, Mom," he'd said. "I'm not that hungry." Which of course made everything worse because he was lying to make her feel better, and what kind of mother couldn't afford to feed her children? She'd pulled herself together after a few minutes, wiping her eyes and checking her reflection in the rearview mirror. She looked tired. More than tired, she looked defeated. There were dark circles under her eyes from too many nights lying awake worrying about money. Her hair needed washing, but she'd been trying to save on the water bill. Her clothes were clean but wrinkled because she couldn't remember the last time she'd had the energy to iron anything. "Okay," she'd said, turning to look at her kids. "We're going to go inside and get something to eat. But we have to share, all right? Mommy doesn't have a lot of money right now, but things are going to get better soon, I promise." Tommy had nodded seriously, like he understood more than a 6-year-old should have to understand. Lily had just smiled, happy to finally be getting food. Rebecca had grabbed her purse, checked one more time to make sure she had all the change, and they'd walked across the parking lot to the restaurant entrance. The Taco Bell was busy for a Tuesday afternoon. There were at least a dozen people in line, mostly teenagers and construction workers on their lunch break. The smell of seasoned beef and warm tortillas hit Rebecca as soon as they walked in, and her own stomach growled loudly. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten a full meal herself. She'd been giving most of the food to the kids, telling herself she wasn't that hungry, that she'd eat later. They'd gotten in line, and Rebecca had pulled out her change, holding it carefully in both hands. She'd counted it 3 times already, but she counted it again just to be sure. $7.60. She looked up at the menu board again, scanning for the cheapest options. 2 bean burritos and a small order of cinnamon twists. That would be enough to feed both kids. It would cost exactly $6.47 with tax. She'd have a little left over. Maybe she could get them a small drink to share. Tommy had tugged on her sleeve. "Mom, can I have a soda?" His voice was hopeful but quiet. He wasn't demanding, just asking. Rebecca had looked down at the change in her hands, doing the math again. If she added a small drink, she'd be cutting it close. She'd probably be a few cents short. "We'll see, honey," she'd said, which was what she always said when the answer was probably no, but she didn't want to disappoint him right away. The line moved slowly. Rebecca watched the people ahead of them ordering, seeing them pull out credit cards and $20 bills like it was nothing. A teenage girl in front of them ordered $40 worth of food, laughing with her friends about how hungry they were. A man in a business suit paid with his phone, barely looking at the total. These people weren't counting change in their palms. They weren't worried about whether they could afford to add a drink to their order. Rebecca felt the shame starting to creep up her neck and into her cheeks. She was acutely aware of how she looked, standing there with her kids in their worn-out shoes and her hands full of coins. She was aware of the people behind them in line, probably annoyed at how long this was taking. She was aware of every eye that might glance her way and judge what they saw. But her kids needed to eat. That was all that mattered. She could handle being embarrassed. She'd handled worse things in the past 2 weeks. She could handle this too. The line moved forward, and they were 3 people away from the counter now. Rebecca took a deep breath and held her children's hands a little tighter. They were going to get through this. Somehow they were going to be okay. The line moved forward again, and now there was only one person ahead of Rebecca and her children. A woman in yoga pants ordering 3 combo meals, taking her time deciding between soft and crunchy tacos. Rebecca shifted her weight from one foot to the other, very aware of the coins growing warm in her sweaty palms. Tommy was being patient, looking at the pictures on the menu board, while Lily had started to lean against her mother's leg, tired and hungry. Finally, it was their turn. The cashier was a teenage boy, maybe 16 or 17, with acne on his chin and a name tag that said Brandon. He looked bored, the kind of bored that comes from standing behind a register for hours during a slow shift. "Welcome to Taco Bell, what can I get you?" he said in a monotone voice, not really looking at Rebecca. Rebecca cleared her throat. "Hi, can I get 2 bean burritos and a small cinnamon twist, please?" Her voice came out quieter than she'd intended. Brandon punched the order into the register without much interest. "That all?" Tommy tugged on her sleeve again. "The drink, Mom?" Rebecca looked down at the change in her hands one more time. She was already cutting it close. Just water cups, please," she said to the cashier. "Free water cups." "That'll be $6.47, Brandon said, still barely looking at her. This was the moment Rebecca had been dreading. She stepped closer to the counter and began placing her coins down, organizing them into small piles. Quarters here, dimes there, nickels in another pile. She started counting out loud quietly. 25, 50, 75, $1. Brandon sighed, a long, obvious sigh that made Rebecca's face flush hot. He glanced back at his manager, who was busy with something in the kitchen, then looked at Rebecca with an expression that made it clear he thought she was wasting his time. 125. 150, 175, Rebecca continued, trying to ignore the way her hands were shaking now. A quarter slipped from her fingers and rolled across the counter. Brandon caught it with one hand and slapped it down, making a sharp sound that drew attention from other customers. Behind her, Rebecca could hear the line growing. She could feel people's presence, their impatience building like pressure in the air. Someone coughed. Someone else whispered something to their companion. Rebecca's face burned hotter. $2, $2.25. She was sweating now, and one of her dimes slipped from her hand completely, falling to the floor and rolling away. The sound of it bouncing on the tile seemed impossibly loud in Rebecca's ears. "Mom, you dropped one," Tommy said, his small voice full of concern. "I know, baby, I know," Rebecca said, her voice cracking just slightly. She bent down to look for the dime, still holding the rest of the change, and Lily, thinking it was a game, bent down too, bumping her head into Rebecca's chin. Lily started crying. Not loud, but that tired, hungry, overwhelmed cry of a 4-year-old who'd had enough of a hard day. Rebecca straightened up, trying to comfort her daughter while still holding the money. And that's when more coins spilled from her hands. Quarters and nickels scattered across the counter and floor, making a sound like rain on metal. Oh no, I'm so sorry," Rebecca stammered, trying to gather the coins while holding Lily with one arm. Tommy immediately dropped to the floor to help, crawling around to pick up the scattered change. Brandon let out another sigh, this one even louder and more theatrical. Maybe you could, use a card or something? Brandon said, not bothering to hide his irritation now. I don't have my card with me, Rebecca lied, her eyes stinging with tears she absolutely refused to let fall. Not here. Not in front of her children and all these strangers. Are you serious right now? The voice came from behind her in line, loud and sharp. Rebecca didn't turn around, but she could hear it clearly. A man's voice, dripping with contempt. This is ridiculous. Some people shouldn't even be in here if they can't afford fast food. Rebecca froze, her hands full of coins that Tommy was handing back up to her. The words hit her like a physical blow. Her throat tightened and she could feel the tears winning their battle now, pressing hot against her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered, more to her children than to anyone else. I'm so sorry. Tommy, help me count this quickly, okay? The man behind her wasn't done. I've got a meeting in 20 minutes, he announced to everyone and no one. This is absolutely ridiculous. Who comes to a fast food place and pays in loose change? Rebecca wanted to disappear. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. She wanted to grab her children and run out the door and never come back. But they were hungry, and she had the money and she was going to get them their meal even if she had to endure this humiliation. I'm counting as fast as I can, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She could feel everyone watching her now. The whole restaurant had gotten quiet. Attention focused on the struggling mother at the counter with her crying daughter and her son on his hands and knees picking up coins. Brandon had his arms crossed now, not even pretending to be polite anymore. Another worker, a girl with a ponytail, glanced over with a mixture of pity and secondhand embarrassment. The manager, a tired-looking woman in her 40s, had noticed the holdup and was making her way toward the front counter. $3, $3.25, $3.50, Rebecca continued, but her voice was shaking badly now, and she'd lost count twice already. She had to start over, which earned another dramatic groan from the man behind her. This is unbelievable, the man said louder. I'm going to be late because someone can't get their life together enough to afford a $6 meal. That did it. The tears came, silent but unstoppable, rolling down Rebecca's cheeks. She wiped at them quickly with the back of her hand, trying to hide them from Tommy and Lily, but Tommy saw anyway. His little face crumpled with worry and confusion. He'd never seen his mother cry in public before. Don't cry, Mom, he said, standing up with a handful of coins. I got these ones, see? We have enough. Rebecca took the coins from her son with shaking hands, and that's when the manager reached the counter. Is there a problem here? She asked, her voice professional but with an edge to it. She was looking at Brandon, not at Rebecca. No problem, Brandon said quickly. Just taking a while. The manager's eyes softened when she looked at Rebecca's tear-stained face and the two children. Take your time, honey, she said quietly to Rebecca. There's no rush, but there was a rush. Rebecca could feel the pressure of the growing line, the weight of the man's judgment behind her, the stares of the other customers. She counted faster, piling the coins into groups. $6, $6.25, $6.47. There, that's exactly right. She pushed the piles toward Brandon, who began counting them himself, slowly and deliberately as if he didn't trust her math. Each second felt like an hour. That's when another voice spoke up from somewhere behind the angry businessman. It was a calm voice, steady and kind, cutting through the tension like a warm breeze. Excuse me, the voice said. Maybe we could all use a little patience and compassion here. Rebecca still didn't turn around. She was too focused on holding herself together, on not completely breaking down in front of her children. Brandon finished counting the coins, nodded, and began entering the order into the system. The manager remained nearby, a quiet presence of support, but the restaurant had shifted somehow. The air felt different. Something was about to happen that would change everything about this terrible, humiliating moment. Rebecca just didn't know it yet. Rebecca heard movement behind her, footsteps approaching the counter. She still didn't turn around, too embarrassed and too focused on just getting through this moment. Brandon had finished counting her coins and was about to hand her the receipt when someone stepped up beside her, close enough that she could see worn leather boots and dark jeans in her peripheral vision. Excuse me, the calm voice said again, and this time Rebecca realized it was directed at Brandon, not at the rude man in line. I'd like to pay for this order, and please add whatever else the kids would like. Rebecca's head snapped up and she finally turned to look at who was speaking. Standing next to her was a tall man, probably in his late 50s, with dark hair touched with gray and a kind face partially covered by a few days of beard growth. He was wearing jeans, a dark t-shirt, and a leather motorcycle jacket. Under his arm he carried a helmet. And his eyes, there was something about his eyes that was immediately recognizable, even though Rebecca's brain was struggling to process what she was seeing. It was Keanu Reeves. The actual Keanu Reeves was standing in a Los Angeles Taco Bell, offering to pay for her children's meal. What? Rebecca managed to say, her voice coming out as barely more than a whisper. The tears were still wet on her cheeks and she probably looked like a complete mess. And now a movie star was standing next to her being kind, and her brain simply could not handle this turn of events. Keanu smiled at her, a gentle smile that reached his eyes. "Please," he said softly, "let me help." He pulled a credit card from his wallet and handed it to Brandon, who was now staring with his mouth literally hanging open. "Dude," Brandon said, then caught himself. Sir, you're..." He couldn't seem to finish a sentence. "Just a hungry guy getting some Taco Bell," Keanu said with a slight smile. Then he turned his attention to Tommy and Lily. He crouched down so he was at their eye level, which Rebecca noticed because most adults didn't bother to do that. "Hey there," he said to Tommy. "Cool Spider-Man shirt. Is he your favorite?" Tommy, who had been staring with wide eyes, nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said quietly. "He's the best one because he's nice and he helps people." "That's a great reason," Keanu said seriously. "The best heroes are the ones who help people, not the ones with the most powers." He looked at Lily, who had stopped crying and was now watching this stranger with curiosity. "And what about you? What do you like?" Lily, being 4 and therefore having less filter than her brother, said exactly what she was thinking. "I like your hair. It's long like a princess." Keanu laughed, a real laugh that made the tension in Rebecca's chest loosen just a little bit. "Thank you. I appreciate that. Now what do you two want to eat? Whatever you want, okay? Don't worry about the price." Rebecca finally found her voice, though it still shook. "You don't have to do this." "Really, I have the money, I know you do," Keanu interrupted gently, standing back up to his full height. "I'm not doing this because you can't. I'm doing this because I want to. Because your kids are hungry and you've had a hard day, and sometimes we all need a little help. There's no shame in that." The way he said it, looking directly at her with those kind eyes, made Rebecca believe him for just a moment. There's no shame in that. She wanted so badly for that to be true. Behind them in line, the rude businessman had gone completely silent. In fact, the entire restaurant had gone silent. People were pulling out their phones, not even trying to be subtle about it. Someone whispered, "Is that really him?" Someone else was already texting. But Keanu ignored all of it. His attention focused on Rebecca and her children. "I want a crunchy taco," Tommy said, his confidence growing. "And a burrito and..." "Can I have a Mountain Dew?" "You can have whatever you want," Keanu assured him. He looked at Brandon, who was still frozen in some state between starstruck and confused. "Add a crunchy taco and a burrito to the order, and a medium Mountain Dew." "A large," Keanu corrected himself, winking at Tommy. Growing kids need large drinks. Lily tugged on Keanu's jacket with one small hand. "I want cinnamon twists. Lots of them. And a Sprite." "Cinnamon twists and a Sprite," Keanu repeated to Brandon. "Make it 2 orders of cinnamon twists. And you know what? Let's add some of those nacho fries too. Kids love those, right?" He looked at Rebecca for confirmation. Rebecca nodded, unable to form words. She was still holding the change in her hands, the coins that had caused all this. Embarrassment, and now they felt strange and meaningless. Keanu noticed. "Hey," he said softly, just to her. "Keep that. Buy them ice cream later in the week or save it or whatever you need. Today's meal is on me." "I don't know what to say," Rebecca whispered. "Thank you doesn't seem like enough." "Thank you is always enough," Keanu replied. "And you don't have to say anything at all." Brandon finally managed to process the order, his hands shaking slightly as he ran Keanu's card. The total came to just over $30 with all the additions. Keanu didn't even glance at the amount. He just signed the receipt and then did something that surprised everyone. He added a $50 tip right there on a fast food receipt. "For your patience," he said to Brandon, who looked like he might faint. The manager, who had been watching all of this with wide eyes, stepped forward. "Mr. Reeves, this is incredibly kind of you." Can we get you anything? On the house? Just a couple of bean burritos, Keanu said with a smile. And maybe one of those large Mountain Dews. I've been riding for a few hours and I'm pretty thirsty. Then he turned to face the line of people behind him, his expression changing slightly. His eyes found the businessman who had been so cruel earlier, the one who'd complained about meetings and people who couldn't get their lives together. The man was now staring at his shoes, his face red, clearly wishing he could be anywhere else. Keanu didn't yell. He didn't make a scene. He just spoke in that same calm, steady voice, but there was steel underneath it now. You know, he said, and everyone in the restaurant leaned in to hear. I've learned something in my life. The way we treat people when they're at their lowest point says everything about who we are as human beings. This woman, he gestured to Rebecca, is working hard to feed her children. She's doing her best. That deserves respect, not judgment. The businessman opened his mouth, then closed it. He seemed to shrink somehow, getting smaller under the weight of Keanu's words and the stares of everyone around him. We all struggle sometimes, Keanu continued. Every single one of us. Rich, poor, famous, unknown, it doesn't matter. We all have moments when we need help, when we need patience, when we need someone to show us a little kindness. And the people who mock others in those moments, they're showing us exactly who they are. The silence in the Taco Bell was absolute. Even the kitchen sounds seemed muted. The businessman mumbled something that might have been an apology and quickly left the line, heading for the door. No one tried to stop him. Keanu turned back to Rebecca and her children, his expression softening again. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't mean to make a thing out of it. I can't stand bullies. Thank you, Rebecca said again, and this time she meant it for more than just the meal. She meant it for the dignity he'd just handed back to her, for standing up to that man, for treating her children like they mattered. Thank you for everything. Nothing to thank me for, Keanu said. Then he looked at Tommy and Lily. Hey, after we get our food, would you guys want to sit with me for a bit? I could use some company and I'd love to hear more about Spider-Man. Tommy looked up at his mother, his eyes shining with excitement and disbelief. Rebecca, still processing everything that had just happened, nodded. If you're sure you don't mind, she said. I wouldn't have offered if I minded, Keanu replied with another one of those warm smiles. Besides, I'm curious about this princess hair comment. I might need some styling tips. Lily giggled, and the sound of it, pure and happy and unburdened, made Rebecca's eyes fill with tears again. But these were different tears. These were the kind that came from relief, from unexpected grace, from the sudden realization that maybe, just maybe, things could still be okay. They found a booth in the corner, away from the growing crowd of onlookers who were trying very hard to look like they weren't staring. Keanu carried the tray of food while Rebecca held Lily's hand and Tommy walked close beside her, still clutching his Spider-Man action figure that he'd pulled from his pocket. The table was one of those standard fast food booths, a little sticky and worn, but it felt like the most important place in the world at that moment. Keanu started distributing the food, making a show of presenting each item like it was a fancy restaurant meal. One crunchy taco for the gentleman, he said formally to Tommy, placing it on a napkin in front of him. One burrito prepared by the finest chefs in the land, and one large Mountain Dew served at the perfect temperature. Tommy giggled, some of his shyness melting away. You're funny, he said. I try, Keanu replied with a grin. He turned to Lily. And for the princess with the excellent taste in hair, we have not one but 2 orders of cinnamon twists, because we're living large today. Plus 1 Sprite, and these mysterious things called nacho fries that I've heard legends about. Lily clapped her hands together, then immediately grabbed a cinnamon twist and took a big bite. They're good, she announced with her mouth full, and Rebecca was about to correct her manners when Keanu just laughed. The best review, he said, honest and straight to the point. Rebecca sat down across from him, still feeling surreal about the entire situation. She watched her children dive into their food, with the kind of hunger that broke her heart and filled it at the same time. They were eating. They were happy. That's what mattered. Keanu unwrapped one of his bean burritos and took a bite, completely at ease. It was strange, Rebecca thought, how normal he seemed. She'd expected someone famous to be different somehow, to carry themselves with an awareness of who they were. But he just seemed like a regular person who happened to be kind, so, Keanu said after a moment, looking at Rebecca. How are you doing, really? The question, asked with such genuine concern almost undid her again. She started, then stopped. What was the point of lying? I've been better, she admitted. I lost my job 2 weeks ago. Retail management. They restructured and I got caught in the layoffs. Keanu nodded, his expression understanding rather than pitying. That's rough, he said. Really rough. Especially with kids depending on you. I've been applying everywhere, Rebecca continued, surprised to find herself talking about it. Maybe it was easier to tell a stranger, even if that stranger was famous. Maybe it was because he'd already seen her at her lowest, so there was nothing left to hide. But everywhere wants experience in things I don't have, or they want to pay minimum wage, which won't even cover rent. I keep getting rejected and the money's running out and Her voice cracked. I don't know what I'm going to do. Tommy had stopped eating and was watching his mother with worried eyes. Keanu noticed immediately. Hey, Tommy, he said, redirecting the boy's attention. That Spider-Man you've got there, is that the classic version or one of the new ones? Tommy brightened a little. It's Miles Morales, he said, holding up the small figure. He's Spider-Man too, but different. Ah, Miles, Keanu said, examining the toy with real interest. He's the one who learned that anyone can be Spider-Man, right? That it's not about having powers, but about choosing to do the right thing even when it's hard? Yeah, Tommy said excitedly. And he has a really cool suit. It's black and red instead of blue and red. While Keanu engaged with Tommy about superhero lore, Rebecca took a shaky breath and wiped her eyes. When Keanu turned back to her a moment later, his expression was thoughtful. I want to tell you something, he said quietly, leaning forward slightly. And I hope it doesn't sound like I'm just some rich guy who doesn't understand. But I do understand, more than you might think. Rebecca waited, uncertain what he meant. My sister had leukemia, Keanu continued, his voice softer now. For years she fought it, and I watched what it did to my family, to our finances, to our sense of stability. We went from being okay to barely holding on. I watched my parents struggle with medical bills, with trying to keep everything normal for us kids while their world was falling apart. I'm sorry, Rebecca said, because she didn't know what else to say. Thank you, Keanu replied. She's okay now, thank God. But those years taught me something important. They taught me that hardship doesn't discriminate. It can hit anyone at any time for any reason, and the people going through it aren't weak or failures. They're just people dealing with circumstances beyond their control. He took a sip of his Mountain Dew, gathering his thoughts. I've been fortunate in my life and career, more fortunate than most, but I remember what it feels like to worry about money, to not know if we could afford groceries that week, to feel the shame of needing help. And I learned that shame is a useless emotion. It doesn't help anyone. All it does is make us feel worse about situations that are already hard enough. Rebecca felt something loosening in her chest, some tight knot of anxiety and self-judgment that had been there for weeks. It's hard not to feel it, though, she said. The shame. Like I should have saved more or been smarter about money or— Stop, Keanu interrupted gently. You were working. You were managing. You were doing everything right. And then something happened that was completely outside your control. That's not a personal failure. That's just life being unpredictable and sometimes cruel. Lily, who had been contentedly munching on nacho fries, suddenly piped up. Mommy works really hard, she announced to Keanu. She's tired all the time, but she still plays with us. I can tell she works hard, Keanu said to Lily. And you know what? You guys are lucky to have a mom who loves you so much. That's the most important thing in the world. Tommy nodded in agreement, his mouth full of burrito. After he swallowed, he said, Mom says things will get better soon. Right, Mom? Rebecca looked at her son, at his trusting face, and felt the weight of that trust. Right, she said, trying to sound confident. Things will get better. They will, Keanu said, and something in his voice made it sound like more than just reassurance. But in the meantime, I want to help a little more if you'll let me. He pulled out his wallet again, and Rebecca immediately started to protest. No, please, you've already done so much. Not money, Keanu said quickly. Well, not directly. I have a friend who owns a business here in LA. They're always looking for good managers, people who have experience with customers and teams. I can't promise anything, but I can make an introduction, give you a chance to interview. He pulled out a business card and a pen, flipping the card over to write on the back. Her name is Patricia Chen. She runs a small chain of bookstores and coffee shops. Tell her I sent you. Tell her about your retail management experience. He slid the card across the table to Rebecca. That's her direct number. Call Monday morning. Rebecca picked up the card with trembling fingers, reading the name and number written in Keanu's neat handwriting. I don't... Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me. I know enough, Keanu said simply. I know you're a good mother who's working hard for her kids. I know you've had some bad luck and could use a break. And I know my friend Patricia values people who care about others and show up even when things are tough. That's you. What if she doesn't hire me? Rebecca asked, that familiar fear creeping back in. Then you keep trying, Keanu said. But something tells me you're going to do great. You're stronger than you think you are. Anyone who can stand up there and count out change for her kids' dinner while people are being cruel, who can hold it together for her children even when she's falling apart, that person has more strength than most people will ever need to show. Rebecca felt the tears coming again, but she didn't fight them this time. Thank you, she whispered, for all of this. For the food, for the card, for treating us like we matter. You do matter, Keanu said firmly. Don't ever forget that. Your worth isn't determined by your bank account or your job title. It's determined by how you show up for the people you love, and from what I can see, you show up every single day. They sat there for a while longer, eating and talking about lighter things. Keanu asked Tommy about school and what he wanted to be when he grew up. He played a silly game with Lily where they made funny faces at each other. He told them a few stories about learning to ride motorcycles and about working on movie sets. He made them laugh, which in turn made Rebecca's heart feel lighter than it had in weeks. When they finally finished eating, the restaurant was even more crowded, with people clearly having come in just to catch a glimpse of the actor. Keanu seemed to notice but didn't acknowledge it. He helped Rebecca gather their trash, and when they stood to leave, he did something unexpected. He gave her a hug, brief but genuine. You're going to be okay, he said quietly in her ear. Call Patricia. Take the interview. And remember that asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Rebecca nodded against his shoulder, allowing herself this moment of comfort from a stranger who had shown her more kindness than she'd known in months. As they walked toward the door, Keanu knelt down one more time to say goodbye to Tommy and Lily. You two take care of your mom, okay? He said, she's pretty special. Will we see you again? Lily asked with the innocent hope of a 4-year-old. Maybe someday, Keanu said with a smile. But even if we don't, I want you to remember something. Being kind to other people is the most important thing you can do in life. It costs nothing, but it means everything. Tommy nodded solemnly as if he was receiving wisdom from a real superhero, which in a way he was. I'll remember, he promised. Then Keanu did one final thing that would stay with Rebecca forever. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out 2 $20 bills. Before she could protest, he pressed them into Tommy's hand. Ice cream money, he said with a wink. For later this week. And maybe some new crayons or whatever kids like these days. Keanu, I can't, Rebecca started. You can, he interrupted gently. And you will. For them, he gestured to the children. Please, Rebecca swallowed hard and nodded. Thank you, she said one more time, knowing the words would never fully capture what this meant. Take care of yourself, Keanu replied. Then he picked up his motorcycle helmet, gave them all a final wave, and walked out into the afternoon sunshine. Through the window, Rebecca watched him climb onto a black motorcycle, put on his helmet and ride away, disappearing into Los Angeles traffic like a regular person, not like someone who had just changed someone's life. The manager approached as Rebecca and her children headed for the exit. Miss, she said quietly, I just wanted to say, what happened earlier with that customer and Brandon being impatient? I'm sorry. You deserved better. It's okay, Rebecca said, and she meant it. The earlier humiliation felt distant now, almost like it had happened to someone else. It's not okay, the manager insisted. But that man, Mr. Reeves, he was right about everything he said. You were doing your best for your kids. That's all any parent can do. Rebecca thanked her and left, holding her children's hands as they walked to the car. The evening was just beginning to cool down, and the sky was turning that soft golden color that Los Angeles gets right before sunset. In the car, Tommy clutched the $40 like treasure, and Lily was already falling asleep in her car seat, full and content. That night, after putting the kids to bed, Rebecca sat at her kitchen table with Patricia Chen's business card in front of her. She read the name over and over, almost afraid to believe it was real. What if she called and Patricia had no idea what she was talking about? What if this was some kind of mistake? But Monday morning came and Rebecca made the call. Her hand shook as she dialed and her voice trembled when Patricia's assistant answered. Hi, my name is Rebecca Torres. Keanu Reeves gave me this number and said I should call about a possible management position. There was a brief pause, then the assistant said, Oh yes, Ms. Chen has been expecting your call. Let me put you through. Patricia Chen turned out to be warm and professional, and yes, Keanu had already called her over the weekend. They set up an interview for Wednesday. Rebecca spent the next 2 days preparing, researching the bookstore chain, practicing answers to common interview questions, and trying not to let hope overwhelm her caution. The interview went well. Better than well, actually. Patricia seemed genuinely impressed with Rebecca's retail experience and her ideas for customer engagement. 2 days later, Rebecca got the call. They wanted to offer her a position as assistant manager at their flagship store, with the possibility of promotion to store manager within 6 months. The salary was more than she'd been making at her old job. Rebecca cried when she hung up the phone. But these were different tears again. Tears of relief, of gratitude, of the overwhelming sense that maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind them. The story didn't end there, though. Someone at the Taco Bell had recorded part of what happened on their phone. Not the embarrassing beginning, thankfully, but Keanu paying for the meal and speaking to the rude businessman. The video went viral within days. Millions of people watched it, shared it, commented on it. Some praised Keanu for his kindness. Others shared their own stories of struggling and being judged. Rebecca's identity remained mostly private, which she was grateful for. She didn't want to be famous for being poor. She didn't want to be that woman from the Taco Bell video. But she did agree to one interview with a local news station on the condition that they focus on the bigger message rather than on her personal struggles. What happened that day wasn't really about a celebrity doing something nice, she told the reporter. It was about what we owe each other as human beings. Dignity, respect, compassion. Keanu didn't help me because I deserved it or because I was special. He helped me because I needed it and because he could. That's how we should all live. The $40 Keanu had given the kids, Rebecca did take them for ice cream as promised. But she also opened a small savings account for emergencies, putting the rest in there. She never wanted to be in that position again, counting change at a fast food counter, but if she was, she wanted to remember how it felt to receive unexpected kindness. 3 months into her new job, Rebecca got her first paycheck as the newly promoted store manager. It was enough to cover rent, groceries, and even save a little. That evening, she did something she'd been thinking about for weeks. She went to the same Taco Bell. Brandon was working the counter again. He looked up when Rebecca approached and his eyes widened with recognition. Oh, hey, he said, sounding genuinely pleased to see her. You're the lady from... Yeah, how are you doing? I'm doing really well, Rebecca said with a smile. Actually, I wanted to thank you. Brandon looked confused. Thank me? But I was kind of rude that day. I felt terrible about it afterward. You were having a long shift and I was taking a while, Rebecca said. But you gave me my receipt and you took my money even though it was all in change. And you didn't actually do anything wrong. Sometimes we all just have hard days. She ordered $50 worth of food, far more than she needed, and told Brandon to give it to the next few customers who looked like they might be struggling. Pay it forward, she said, from someone who received more kindness than she could ever repay. Brandon's eyes got a little watery. That's really cool, he said. I'll make sure it goes to people who need it. Rebecca started doing this regularly. Once a month, she'd stop by a fast food restaurant or a grocery store and quietly pay for someone else's food. She never made a big deal about it. She never filmed it or posted about it on social media. She just did it because someone had done it for her, and because she'd learned that kindness doesn't need an audience to be meaningful. Years passed. Tommy grew up wanting to help people, eventually becoming a social worker. He'd tell people it was because of the day Spider-Man's real-life equivalent showed up at Taco Bell, and taught him that heroes are the ones who help others. Lily, as she got older, developed a fierce sense of justice and a quick defense for anyone being bullied or judged. She'd learned early that people's circumstances don't define their worth. Rebecca never forgot that Tuesday afternoon. Sometimes when she had a particularly hard day at work or when bills piled up or when life felt overwhelming, she'd pull out that business card, now laminated and kept in her wallet. She'd read Patricia's name in Keanu's handwriting and she'd remember that in her darkest moment a stranger had seen her struggling and chosen compassion over judgment. She'd remember that dignity can be given back with just a few kind words and a genuine smile. She'd remember that we're all just trying our best, and sometimes our best doesn't look like much to outside observers, but it's everything to the people who depend on us. The viral video eventually faded from the internet's collective memory, replaced by newer stories and newer viral moments. Keanu Reeves went on making movies and being quietly generous in ways that occasionally made headlines. He probably didn't think much about that day at Taco Bell. It was just another moment of kindness in a life apparently full of them. But Rebecca thought about it often. She thought about it every time she saw a parent struggling at a checkout line. She thought about it every time she witnessed someone being judged for circumstances beyond their control. And she thought about it every time she had the opportunity to help someone else, to offer dignity instead of judgment, to choose compassion over convenience. Because that's what Keanu had really given her that day. Not just a meal, not just a job connection, not just $40 in ice cream money. He'd given her a reminder that the world still had goodness in it, that people could still surprise you with their kindness, that one person choosing to see another person's humanity could change everything. And Rebecca had taken that lesson and made it her own. She'd become someone who paid it forward, who stood up for others, who chose kindness whenever possible. In that way, the ripple that started in a Taco Bell on a Tuesday afternoon in Los Angeles continued spreading outward, touching more lives than anyone could count. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest waves. Sometimes a movie star buying tacos for a struggling mother does more than fill hungry bellies. It restores faith in humanity. And sometimes, the people we help end up helping countless others, creating a chain of compassion that extends far beyond that first moment of grace. That's what Rebecca told her children as they grew up. That's what she told the employees she trained and mentored. And that's what she hoped the world would remember. That we're all one bad day away from needing help. And we're all one kind gesture away from being someone's hero.